Good to have Chris Hine back with me on this edition of Daily Delivery. Of course, covers the Timberwolves, and we are here for a special event covering the Wolves. Start of the season Tuesday, Chris. Much anticipated. A lot has happened this offseason very recently. It was a quiet offseason until a few weeks ago in the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Changes the complexion, at least somewhat, of this year's team. It doesn't really change expectations. Chris, I think the biggest question so far is, how do you feel like things have settled in or not settled in with the new players, Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo?
I think with DiVincenzo, it's been a seamless fit from all indications. You know, Chris Finch has referenced him being here, it seems like forever in some ways. So that seems to be a pretty easy fit so far with the style that the Wolves like to play and what Finch is looking for, and specifically what the team was looking for from somebody who could shoot the three, defend a little bit, who's going to up their 3-point volume, handle the ball a little bit as well. You know, all these things that they kind of needed. You know, whether it was backup point guard minutes, more 3-point volume, he kind of fits the bill for them. So I think from that end of things, that acquisition has been a seamless fit. Julius Randle got out on the floor the other night in Chicago for the first time since late January, as he's been dealing with the shoulder issue and the rehabilitation from it. Said he felt good. You know, I asked Finch if there were going to be any limitations on Randle coming into the season. He didn't think there would be, but you know, he wasn't 100% certain on that. You know, we'll see as the season rolls along here. But with Randle, you know, I think it's going to be a little differently stylistic from what people are accustomed to with Karl-Anthony Towns. Yes, they both have the reputation of, you know, having the ball in their hands a lot. But I think in Randle's case, he's going to be looking a little more to find open teammates to, you know, Finch is very excited about how many open threes Randle can create for the offense, and that seems to be a theme of this offseason for the Wolves, is more threes. And Finch has had him in New Orleans, so he's seen that ability up close. So that's where that stands at the moment. One thing to keep in mind is that it is very new, and especially with Julius Randle really, you know, ramping up his minutes and seeing game action for the first time in a long time. You know, there could be some bumps in the road offensively early in the season. And I think that's fair to say. Finch was saying it was farther along than he thought it would be last night, but that still doesn't mean once the games start to count for real that things don't change a little bit once Tuesday night rolls around. So I think you just maybe take the offense with a little bit of patience maybe early on, because it might be a work in progress the first few weeks of the season.
Randle, he's going to start, right? Even though he's been banged up, even though he's not fully integrated.
He will start. Yeah, he will start. He started the other night. He will start, and you can kind of keep Nas as the sixth man coming off the bench.
So it's basically just a 1-for-1 switch then. Like Towns is out, Randle's in. And Randle is more of a true 4 than Karl was, right? So at least you kind of have that fit, maybe going a little bit more with Gobert, although Towns, I think, adapted really well to that. But yeah, I think you're right. That's something to watch early in the season. How does that fit stylistically? Is it seamless? Is it not? I think the interesting thing is, like, even if it's not great early, you remember 2 years ago, it was not great early when they brought Gobert in. Feels like this team is loaded up in a way where they could maybe withstand that a little bit more. I mean, you just watched the final preseason game the other night against Denver, when basically the top 8 or 9 players in the rotation didn't play, right? And still, they were, you know, you see a lot of Luka Garza, Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., like a lot of the guys who probably would be rotation players on a team that was at a different stage, and they probably could hold their own. Okay, they don't have to come on so fast unless there's injuries. Like, this team seems like they go pretty deep with quality players, more so than I can remember in a lot of different years.
That's one of the reasons why they did the trade, is you get 2, you know, really solid rotation pieces, a starter and a bench player coming in for one. And it affects everything. It affects everything up and down the roster. So right now, I think one of the strengths that the Wolves had last year was they had a very solid top 8, right?
Yes.
And going into the playoffs, all those 8 guys played minutes, except maybe Kyle Anderson and spurts didn't play a ton. And I think it was maybe the Denver series. Memory escapes me now, but they had a very solid top 8 that they stuck with for most of the year in the postseason. And I think that that's one of the reasons why they did this trade, because you look at it now, and now it's a very solid top 8 again, because you have Nas, DiVincenzo, and Nikhil coming off the bench as your first 3. And then you have a lot of options for those 9th and 10th spots. If Finch wants to go 9 deep in the postseason, he usually goes 9 deep in the regular season, usually shortens it in the postseason. But right now, it seems like slot number 9 is Josh Minot, the third year forward, who's had a really strong offseason, really strong preseason. And he was kind of the guy who was coming off the bench with the second unit in Chicago and in New York. And I know Nas wasn't playing in one of those, and I think Randall wasn't playing in New York, but I think that's an indication that as of right now, I think that 9th slot in the rotation is going to Josh Minot. They have Joe Ingles that they could pivot to if they want more veteran presence, more maybe reliable shooting. But they have raved up and down about Josh Minot's summer and his preseason, and perhaps this is a bit of a breakout for him coming into year 3.
You still got Luka Garza as kind of a next wave big. If something happens, kind of a stretch big. You've got the 2 rookies, Dillingham and Terrence Shannon Jr. I mean, there's, again, a lot of times, if this was a rebuilding team, like Dillingham and Shannon probably be playing 30, 35 minutes a game. Like, they don't have to do that here. You could argue that Shannon is maybe closer to ready for those minutes, and I thought Dillingham looked pretty good the other night against Denver in the minutes he got. But it's interesting. Like, they're going to have to, those guys are going to have to be patient, and the Wolves kind of have some flexibility to, withstand, move some guys around if there's injuries, things like that.
Well, that's just it. It's I think one of the tangential effects of the trade is that it gave, especially Dillingham, a longer runway to take off. And, because last night Finch was talking about, I think he got a question about his backup, kind of the backup point guard role. And basically the trade for DiVincenzo solved a lot of their questions of who was going to be handling that. So it's kind of a backup point guard by committee, with him figuring into it, with Nikhil figuring into it. And so I think with Dillingham, it is going to be more of a wait and see approach. Whereas I think after the draft or free agency, we had him penciled in as the 9th guy in the rotation, just because they needed somebody who was going to play, make, and handle the ball. And I think as a team, you're looking at that and it's like, we have Mike Conley, who's about to turn 37. And then we have a 19-year-old rookie.
Half his age. Yeah.
Right, who's half his age, who are going to be our 2 primary ball handlers coming into a season where we are contenders, right? Mike, obviously, when he's on the floor, is reliable as can be. But again, is his health going to hold up? He's, how many minutes do you want to play him? You can't overextend him. So you would have had to have played Dillingham a lot. Bringing in DiVincenzo kind of lets you have a wait and see approach with Dillingham. And if he impresses you, and great. If he forces his way into minutes, that's the best case scenario for everybody, right? But you don't have to play him now. And I don't get the feeling that the Wolves will be playing him a lot at the start of the season.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Conley, and just all this talk about depth is an entry point into everyone's favorite list at the start of the year, the ESPN top 100 players.
Oh yes,
everyone's favorite. Very, very scientific, but
every national website has to put out. I think it's a requirement now.
It is.
If you're a national outlet that covers the NBA, you must release a top 100 players list.
I found it interesting, mainly for these 2 reasons. One, the Wolves had 7 guys on the list. Now, usually, if you got a top 100 and you're thinking about a 30-team league, like generally speaking, if these were equally distributed, you'd have 3 or 4 on each team, right?
Right. This is like the Beatles populating the top 100 of the Rolling Stone top 100 albums of all time. That's what this is, right?
It's like trying to pick your favorite, your favorite songs by
Mariah.
Exactly. It's like Mariah's top hits, right?
Yes.
Carole King's top hits. It's like trying to populate that. You can only pick 7 with the Wolves,
right.
Because you got Conley at 98, Naz Reid at 87, Jaden McDaniels at 75, Dante DiVincenzo at 75, Julius Randle at 48, Gobert at 34, and Ant at 10. Again, all this is extremely subjective. Let's not get too caught up in the numbers, except that I thought it was interesting. Randle 48, Cat 30. Cat dropped 10 spots on this very scientific list. That was interesting to me. So I
thought him getting traded to New York would have elevated him 10 spots.
I thought so too, but no, they dropped him 10
spots.
Shine
of New York, yeah,
exactly. So you get basically, if you're going off this list, you get 2 top 100 players for one, even if Cat is the higher rated of all 3 of them, and you've basically got 2 bench players who are among the 100 best, or deemed the 100 best in the league, with probably Naz and Dante being those 2. And you still got, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I would not put in the top 100, but is still a very solid player. Like, it shows not just, good depth, but like really good depth on this team and quality in the starting lineup as well.
Well, it goes to show you that, I think depth matters in the NBA now, and depth is something that these second apron teams, which the Wolves are, it's something that you wouldn't think they could have. So it's almost interesting to see that the Wolves are almost kind of bucking the trend in these teams that spend a lot of money, where usually you concentrate your money on 2 or 3 guys, which is what they had before the trade. And now it's a little more spread out. You get a little more depth. And I think they just think that that's a hidden thing you need to have in this age of the NBA, is that depth matters. Now, listen, when we get to the playoffs, you look at that list, and is it better to have 7 guys in the top 100, but only 1 guy in the top 30? Right. Or is it better to have 2 guys in a couple, 1 or 2 others, but nobody else?
Right.
What's that? Is it better to be top heavy, or is it better to have depth? Is it better to have stars and scrubs in your fantasy football lineup, or is it better to have a deep team? Right. The Wolves are going with the depth approach this year, and it offers them a little longer term flexibility. But for this year, I think that's the question is, will they have, when it gets down to crunch time, will they have enough talent and firepower on the floor in their best 5-man lineup to counter whoever's in front of them?
Yeah. Well, if it's not working, they can always pivot to a Kevin Durant trade, and then they'd have two top 10 players.
Yeah. Well, he seemed to enjoy playing with Ant this summer.
He does.
Who knows? Yeah,
he does. Yeah. But it's a good point, and I think that is the question for this season. A lot of this hinges around just how good Ant is, of course, and everybody's going to be watching to see how the 2 new players do. They're going to be watching to see how Cat does in New York. Cat, by the way, I saw. Couldn't keep his eyes on the Billie Eilish concert.
Well, listen, Billie Eilish music gets you in your feelings pretty quickly. So I mean, true. I'm sure he was listening to like Birds of a Feather or something like that, and was like, "Oh, I just miss Minnesota. I need to see what my ex is up to."
He's watching the Wolves Bulls game, which was the one that Julius Randle played in. By the way, I want to point that out. So maybe he was more interested to see how Randall was playing than he was his old teammates. Who knows? But I thought that was interesting. But it's a lot to watch this year. I think the over under for the Wolves right now is like 53, something like that. So it's showing like few wins, fewer than last year. I don't know if that's a function of them being a lesser team than last year, and more of a function of the regular season might not mean quite as much to them this season as it did last year, and the West is really good.
I think so. But I think with the depth, I think you are built to be a team that can win in the regular season, a team that can withstand injuries and disruptions to your rotation, whereas other teams might not. So I also do think in the same way, like we said last year a little bit, we thought the Wolves were going to be a good regular season team. They were. And I kind of get that feeling coming into this year. It's again where in the playoffs when rotations get consolidated and stars play more minutes, and does another team just have more firepower? Is a Luka Kyrie situation where those two are just the two best players on the floor in a playoff series, is that enough to overcome what the Wolves' depth is? Now, it's different depth than what the Wolves had last year. They definitely focused on getting more firepower, getting more shooting, and because I think in that Dallas series they were kind of limited with some of their options. But I think at the end of the day that's still going to be the question. But I do think with the depth that they have, it's still going to be I would expect a very competitive regular season team night in and night out that is probably in the top 4 hunt again this year.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
I think that's fair. Do you feel like the DiVincenzo acquisition in particular, is that aimed at Dallas because they need one more wing defender to kind of run around? I mean, obviously they have Ant, they've got Jaden, they've got Na, but you can't have enough in a series like that.
I don't know if it's aimed at Dallas in particular, but maybe just to make them more versatile in general, to be more maybe able to match up differently with teams, because now you can go with some smaller lineups. You're not beholden to playing Cat 30 plus minutes a night. You can afford to roll with kind of a 3-wing lineup. You know what I mean? Like I think you have more options now in terms of lineups and rotations. I don't know if it's specifically against Dallas, but I do think they're better equipped to handle a Dallas series now. The thing is, are they now weaker against Denver? Potentially, if Denver is still a contender, and we can maybe get into that a little bit. But, I think, last year the giant you were trying to slay was Denver, but now, and you were out of gas by the time you got to Dallas, and it was a different kind of matchup, and maybe you weren't as equipped to beat Dallas as you were Denver. But I don't know that Dallas is going to make it through this year. Who knows who's going to make it through? I think they're better equipped to play Oklahoma City, which is another emerging contender.
Good point. Yeah,
I think that they have the wings to kind of match up with them now a little better than perhaps they did. But we'll see.
That's probably a good entry point. We kind of finish with this. What's your West pecking order? Top 4, top 6, top 8, however far you want to go.
I saw the Hartenstein injury, and he's going to be out for a little bit, but I still like Oklahoma City to be kind of the 1 seed in the regular season. They were last year. I don't see why that necessarily changes this year. Kind of looking up and down the West, Dallas I think is going to be there. We'll see. Just they're kind of your typical like regular season may not matter as much to them.
They don't mind winning 50 games.
They don't mind being they don't mind being the 5 seed or the 4 seed or whatever, and turning it on in the playoffs. But I think with Klay Thompson there, being able to maybe take advantage of the shots that are going to be created for him in the regular season, at least, I think that's a good addition. We know Denver is going to win a lot of games just by the sheer force of Nikola Jokic, regardless of maybe the depth they have around him. Losing KCP was huge for them, and I think that probably shows up more in the postseason than the regular season, although you never know. And I'd put the Wolves in that top 4 mix. I would, at least in the regular season. I don't see why they have to take a significant step back in the regular season without Karl. Other teams I'm got my eye on. I think maybe keep an eye on Sacramento this year. And we'll see if adding DeRozan affects how they play and kind of the way you have to defend them on a nightly basis now. Memphis coming back, can they get that band together that was so good, in a couple of years ago? We'll see. But that's, assuming everybody's healthy and back, that's a decent amount of talent there too. So yeah, I still like the Wolves, I think, in the top four. What do you think?
I think so. I think you got to put the Lakers and the Suns in the mix too. I mean, the Lakers, they still have LeBron. He's still one of the best. We haven't talked about Golden State. Like, just the fact that we've talked about a bunch of teams, like there's a lot of teams that can win 45 games at least. And some of it's going to depend on injuries, how serious you're taking the regular season. I think you made a good point that the Wolves could again be a good regular season team. I think they're going to try to rest guys a little bit more, kind of gear up for the playoffs. I think last year getting a high seed meant a lot to them. Having a good regular season, kind of proving themselves, meant more. That said, it wouldn't shock me if they won the West this year, just because of how deep they are. Just in terms of being the one seed, top, or the one seed. Sorry, being the one seed, being the top regular season team in the West. I think your points about the playoffs are a good one. I think they, showed they have a certain playoff mettle last year, but I think Dallas is tough. Denver is always tough with Jokic. I think Memphis is going to be a top 8 team at least this year. They could be a top 6 team because I like what they've got coming back. I think they can kind of resume where they were. I think Zach Edey is going to be a pretty important piece for them that coming in from the draft as well. So we'll see. I like the Wolves in the top 4 again, and it wouldn't surprise me if they ended up top 1, top 2, just because of, you just look up and down the roster, they'll have a good chance to win every night.
They will. And even if they try to reduce Mike Conley's workload throughout the season, or something like that, or if they have to kind of monitor Randall coming off of the shoulder, they have the depth to replace those guys and still field really competitive teams on a nightly basis. We know Ant likes to play as many games as possible. We know Finch likes to coach to win as many games as possible. That is the culture that they have set on this team. They have bucked the load management trends for a large part of Finch's tenure here. I'm not anticipating that changing anytime soon. This is a team that is in a go for it kind of mode, and so I think they're going to be trying to win as many games as possible. Because look, last year they were 1 game away from being the 1 seed. So every game does indeed matter. I think some of the teams you mentioned too, like the Lakers and the Suns, I think I expect them to be more playoff geared teams than regular season oriented teams. But I think of the two there, we should probably mention Phoenix. I do think Phoenix, with the addition of Tyus Jones, made a significant addition that they were missing a year ago. And I think the Wolves series made that painfully obvious that they needed a point guard, and they went out and got a very good one. So, the way the market fell, and him ending up going to Phoenix for nothing essentially, was a big get for the Suns, and I would expect them to be better this year.
Agree with that. Starts Tuesday in LA. You get an LA trip right away. It might be nicer in January or February, but what do you got coming out before the season starts?
We're going to have an Ant piece on Sunday, a little bit about his Olympic experience. Talk to some people from Team USA for that, and maybe a little taste of what's to come in my book about Ant later on in the spring. Shameless plug.
Not shameless at all. We're all looking forward to that.
Give you a little taste of that. So look for that on Sunday. And then, it's kind of a season preview story on Julius Randle for Tuesday. His relationship with Chris Finch and how the situation he's in now kind of mirrors, at least in his individual career, the situation he was in when he and Finch worked together in New Orleans, coming in with a player option on a deal, playing for a new contract. But the teams that they are a part of are in very different situations right now. So that's the difference.
Looking forward to all that. Looking forward to the season. Chris Hine, I'm sure we'll be talking plenty as it goes along. Get some rest, gear up. Here we go for the next 82 and beyond.
Absolutely. Can't wait to do it. My sleep schedule, especially, is looking forward to it.
We'll see ya.
See you later.